This is the Flourish Podcast, a series of conversations with therapists and counselors at Flourish Family Therapy.
Jen here. We are at Flourish Family Therapy. I'm here with Kevin, Dr. Lauren, and Cameron. And we're just really relating to the week and thinking about some topics that were coming up all week for us and our clients and thought we would share. So one thing that we were seeing a lot of this week were the stages of change. And how that impacts clients. Not only we were thinking about it in terms of children and teens and parents. So I guess maybe a little bit about what everybody saw this week.
For me, the stages of change, I think that's like one of those things you try to figure it out as a therapist. You're trying to figure out what stage are you in, because you don't want to try and put certain tools out there that a client is not ready for. And so I think this week, I was really encountered situations where children a certain child or certain children and adolescents were, resistant to wanting to actually make that change that maybe the parent wants them to make, but they're not really ready for it because, for whatever reason, they're just not ready for it. Like they kind of see the need, but they kind of I don't know, I don't really want to work on it. I feel like it's not really worth the risk, And so I think for me, it's just trying to get to that point of getting them to accept that that's okay. We don't have to work on it. We actually could work on just building relationship, and just see what that's like. Maybe just building relationship will give you more opportunity to actually accept the risk, of building relationships with others, and so I don't know, but that's kind of what I was working on this week with clients.
Yeah, and I think really with those stages of change too, right? If a parent has an expectation, okay, I'm going to bring, let's say, just like the kids in therapy, right? And for them to change, sometimes that's not the expectation of the child, right? So when our stuff as a parent or whatever comes, then there's some frustration.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're like, no, we need the change now.
Yeah,
and then if it doesn't happen, then there's some disappointment, right? Yeah. There's a lot of internal stuff in a family system that comes that way. And maybe not verbalized that way.
Exactly.
It would be nice, you know what I mean? But now that there's insight and understanding, then, maybe we're working more closely on those stages of change and really coming to the action part or, whatever part creates the change in that.
Yeah.
I've also seen this in some different couples that I've been working with where as a couple, they're expressing a want to kind of move forward or take that action step. And then individually, they're not necessarily in that same place.
Right.
So it's, kind of what they're showing together, what they're wanting to do as a unit, and it may be in conflict with what they're really ready to do individually and what they're really wanting to kind of take on. And so opening up that conversation of how can we challenge that, right? How can we get our individual needs met and take that step back to where we are working on that level or that stage of change that they are at individually, and ultimately then how that can help them come together and meet at a place as a unit or as a couple.
No, that makes sense too, because I think when they realize the importance of meeting their personal needs in terms of the relationship, you can't, if you're not meeting your own, if you're not aware of your own issues and being honest about what you need in the moment, right? Whether that's to, you need time before we start making that change forward or whatever that is. It's if you're not honest with that, then it's going to be hard to actually move forward in the couple therapy.
Yeah. Well, and it can be so easy as a couple to say, oh, well, they need to do this, this, and this, and this.
Right.
But not necessarily have that reflective moment of, well, what I need to do, kind of my part of this is, and then how that can come together for greater work.
Yeah. I see this a lot too in couples work where it's, okay, there's a lot of blame that wants to be going on, right? Okay, well, if you did this, that's that. Well, But I always think like it's not about like the individual winning or losing, but more about if we think about the relationship winning.
Yeah.
Is this in the best interest of the relationship, right? Or is this in the best interest of the child, the family system, whatever we're looking at? Because that's going to really pull through, some of those deep triggers, right? Because we are triggered in a lot of ways, right? We have a lot of I'll say like unhealed things at times, right? Just from childhood or life, and so a lot of times we learn a lot about ourselves through other people. And I think that's a really good example of being able to take a step back, right? Pause and reset and say, okay, like what can I own with this? And what's going to help the family system, family unit, or the relationship grow? But we can't grow as a couple if we're not growing individually, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't expect one person to do a lot of work and growing and then the other person not, and their relationship look that different.
Yeah.
Like everybody's got to be motivated kind of at the same time, right?
Motivation, that's a big one. That's a big thing,
Yeah.
I think when you have depression in a relationship, I mean, any relationship, if there's a person who has depression in it, it makes it so much more difficult to find the collective motivation to move forward without addressing just bring that to awareness. Is like somebody in here is like lacking personal drive, and so that might be a more, how can we work on that? And that actually is a very challenging situation, especially for couples, if there is someone who is experiencing depression, because like how do you address that as a couple when that's an individual thing too? So that's something that I've seen as well. But yeah, that's important, to be able to bring those things to awareness as well. Because sometimes in depression, they're not ready to necessarily work on the relationship because they're really lost personally, like they need something to kind of hang on to, for their own personal self identity sometimes and their own personal kind of journey, and so that can be very challenging in a couples therapy setting.
Well, and you mentioned identity a little bit earlier too, right? Like talking about kids and maybe their hesitance or their resistance to change, right? Because what does that mean for their identification, right? If I change these things, who am I?
Yeah, who am I now?
We say that a lot in, any setting.
Yeah.
Right? Just to be able to find your identification again. Or defining ourselves in any moment. Right. And if we're not aware of that, then it does, allow for some hesitancy, for some resistance to treatment even. Right.
Ooh, yes. I mean, and then maybe we'll circle back to the specific stages of change, but just to hit on an existential note, right? Like, I think people have a hard time sometimes accepting that their identity is constructed and created, right? And so they think that if I just do this, or if I just think harder about this, I'll find who I truly am deep inside, right? When sometimes you'll have to find out who you are by trying new things, by creating yourself, rather than just worrying about who you might actually be and what you're losing if you are to change, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to think sometimes more about like, what does identity and purpose actually mean? Right? And to then reframe that. So they're not looking for something. They're trying to create something that feels true to them on a deeper level, whatever that feels like.
Yeah. Well, and I draw from those spiritual laws a lot, right? And that is exactly what it is. When we're working from our true spirit, our true nature, then everything becomes a little bit easier, right? Because we're coming from our true sense of self, and then those expectations, those resistances really get extinguished because there's not something feeding that, right? Like if I know I'm solid, I'm good where I'm at, I know I'm coming from my purpose and my true spirit, then the things that you say I might not buy into, right? When I'm working from that collective, and we're good, and in any setting. Right? Individuals, with kids, with anybody, right? Really, and developmentally as we navigate kind of like life things, right? It shapes our personality. So we're always in that re-identification process, right? We're always making sure we're being true to ourselves, because when we're not, that's where we get a lot of those hesitancy, those resistance, right? We have to trust ourselves.
I mean, and I think working with adolescents, one thing I've seen is that parents come in and they want you to just tell the kid what it is, right? And no one's ever asked the young person, what do you actually think is true and good, right? And sometimes people aren't able to orient themselves towards change because they're not sure who they are currently even,
Mhm.
and they're not sure really where they're going to head towards, right? But if you help somebody ground their change in what they believe is true for them, right? Their values, right? This is where the values work can be so helpful, right? With young people, they don't even know what they believe sometimes.
Yes.
Mom and dad are telling them
Yes.
this is what's true, this is what's
Yeah.
right, this is what's wrong. And so everything feels fake, imposed on them. And even in therapy, they're like, I'm just here because they told me to be. Right?
Exactly.
It can help to just ask them, like, what do you think about this? And they can be like, it's bullshit. And you'd be like, it definitely sounds like bullshit. I mean, if my mom forced me to be here and I didn't know what the value was, like, I probably would feel the same way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be grounding. And then circling back to the, the dynamics between parents and children, then it makes me ask, like, are parents sometimes bringing the child in so you can make them feel safe? Right? Because the child may be experiencing normal behavior, but it's triggering the parent in some way, right? And the parent really needs relief, but they're pursuing that by putting the child in treatment, right? They want you to fix the child so that they no longer have to be triggered. That this parent may need to be the one in the therapy room all along, right?
Right.
The kid may be actually totally healthy and on a normal developmental track. Not always, but sometimes it's about both parties involved.
Well, and a lot of times, it's a direct reflection of the things that are going on.
Mhm.
The lack of communication, the unrealistic expectations,
Yes.
the not buying into making a change, right? Because that goes directly with what Kevin was saying earlier, right? With those stages of change and like, hey, if a kid's like not seeing a need for that, then they're not going to change.
Yes. Yes.
Like,
absolutely.
Yes.
and maybe, and to your point, maybe you're saying like they don't need to change. Sometimes they don't need to change. Sometimes the parents need to, forgive me, like modify their perception, see another lens, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say, maybe that parent is in a pre-contemplation stage of change. They're not even aware that they need to change yet.
That's interesting.
So they truly think that there is something wrong with the child that they just don't know how to handle. And so, as therapists, it can be challenging when you notice, oh, well, the child's behaving pretty typically, and we see that maybe the parent actually does is being triggered by the behavior, but the parent may not be ready to even see that, and so, that can be challenging, but at the same time, what we have is what we work with, and where they are is that's what we'll be, and so, but it is sometimes good to be aware that they're just not ready to see that yet. So they're in pre-contemplation, and maybe the more that we work with the child, the more that the parent will feel safer, and maybe we can be more honest about what they can do at home, and maybe that would be challenging for them to do, which would then require some more assistance. Who knows? But being present in the moment, I think that's where we're gonna be, as therapists. So, at least that's the goal, is to realize like that is, like what I don't know, like that's what we're here to do. We're here to be just present in the moment with the client, even for clients who are in the session, who are in contemplation or pre-contemplation, because I have a lot of kids who are in session and they're just like, I don't think I need to change anything, this is a waste of time, and I don't know like why I'm here. And I'm like, okay, good to know. So, let's figure out what exactly in your life would you like to be better, and how can we at least use this time wisely. And sometimes it is just, let's explore. Instead of trying to fix something, we'll just explore an aspect of something that we just haven't explored yet, which can be therapeutic.
Well, and even grounding and identification, really drawing on those strengths. So maybe people come to just strengthen their strengths. You know what I mean? And those weaknesses maybe are not, such an integral part, right? It's okay. So let's focus again on what we can control, right? That's the way we look at ourselves, our thoughts that we have. So I think any reminder of that is great. And therapy doesn't have to be, I think to your point, like out of like something that happens, you know what I mean? Like we can we can explore all those things because it's worth doing for for their identification, for the family system, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And I've found that identification has been especially important for like my young adults, early adults, adulthood clients who are seeing these reflections of their past. So I don't know about y'all, but how many times have maybe you sat there and been like, oh my goodness, I'm acting like my parent or my caregiver, or, you see those reflections of how you've been raised, those things that maybe were imposed on you, right? And how that shapes identity. And sometimes those are protective factors. Sometimes those are things that are, great in building that self-esteem. They're values that do provide encouragement to get them through the day. And sometimes that reflection could be a risk factor, right? They see that as, oh no, I'm being my mom or I'm being my dad.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a safe experience for me. That wasn't a positive interaction. And now I am that. And what that does as an identity, and them needing to, in that moment, kind of process, then, okay, but how much of that really is you? How much of that are you wanting to take accountability for? And how much of that can we leave in the past and reframe in a way that's going to be more productive for you moving forward as you are going through these major life transitions that come with the different adult stages where we were typically introduced to our parents and seeing them navigate these same spaces.
Yeah. And I think, realizing that we're not defined by any of those things, right? Our reaction, our response, okay, they're all learning experiences. If it doesn't make us feel comfortable, then we modify it, right? And we help people do that all day, which is the beautiful thing about therapy and, being able to come and navigate whatever life challenges, stages, whatever. Meet you at any stage.
Yes. Yeah, I wonder for those clients who do realize what they're doing is like, consistent with the parent and it's a behavior maybe they said they would never do. Like I would never, get addicted to alcohol or, because my parent was an addict or an alcoholic and, or, maybe it's something, maybe not as, drastic as that, but maybe it's just something like I would never yell at my kids, and so
we see it a lot with like discipline patterns and generationally what was common discipline patterns and how it changes over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with parenting. Like that's such a big, thing is there's a lot of huge shift in parenting, styles and just parenting norms.
Yeah.
And so, but when you see that behavior starting to show itself, I wonder like, what does that say about their relationship or that moment and the effect it's having or that it's had on them? And how do we acknowledge what's happening in the present? And then how do we leave things in the past? Like that's, I guess, a question that came up when you were talking about leaving things in the past. And so do you have any thoughts on like what ways you could differentiate what needs to be left or what?
Yeah, I got more of a visual when you were speaking about that and just thinking of, generational changes. It commonly comes up with like family trauma that's passed down over generations and the image of, matches that are all lined up and it takes the one match coming out of line to stop that fire from really burning and making that impact.
Yeah.
And so in that, it's not really an answer to what do you leave behind, but it's, are you willing to be the one to make a change, whatever that change may be, whatever it may look like, whether it is leaving something or taking something with you. But are you, within our stages of change, are you ready to take that action and to move into a space where it is something that you can do effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, really what I hear you saying too is that congruency, right? When our thoughts and our behaviors and our feelings are congruent, we can move a little bit easier into change, right? If there's that dissonance or that incongruence, then we're really how do you say, like, fighting against ourselves, our thoughts, right?
Yes.
When we're able to not have that dissonance, we can see truly, you know what I mean, that it's okay to make these changes. We're not defined by one thing that happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
I say this all the time, like okay, like if I put my pen on the bookcase, you would see it's on the bookcase, but the bookcase is not defined by the pen being on the bookcase, right? So like all these things that happen or don't have to be our definition of self. Our definition of self comes from our true qualities, our true value, right? Our those core things that we demonstrate, our true spirit. When we act from those places, a lot of things come a lot easier.
Yes.
Right? Because we're not fighting against, we're not resistant to this. We understand, okay? Like, we can change things. Things don't have to be set in stone just because this is the way that it was.
Yeah. And I think also normalizing resistance.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's this impression that resistance is bad,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also okay, like, to resist something, to resist change, to not want to just get swept away by the wave of whatever this new thing is. In that resistance can come reflection. In that resistance can come self-efficacy and empathy, and really time to just acknowledge where you have been and where you're going.
Yeah.
And differentiation, like differentiating yourself creates growth, creates unique identity, where, especially in adolescence, where you see that differentiation happening at this exponential level, like that resistance, even from parents' norms or what parents have instilled in their kids, creates the growth that allows them to be their own person, their own self. And that resistance actually allows them to see what aligns with what they've been taught and what doesn't, so they can try out new things without feeling like, all this shame, or guilt.
Yes.
So I think that's how you find out what your true spirit looks like and what really connects and what doesn't, just trying it out. And that really requires some level of resistance.
Yeah.
So.
And acceptance, acceptance of self, meeting ourselves where we're at, right?
Yeah.
In that moment, to be open to change or to be open to seeing even a new way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because we do that, right? Resistance really comes from a protection state, right? We're trying to preserve our sense of self, protective something, right?
I mean, it just makes me think, back to the parents and youth thing, like a parent brings a kid in, a teenager, they're like, oh my God, something is wrong. They're rebelling. As if that's not the healthy thing for the teenager to be doing to form their own identity.
Yeah.
And so then back to what I was saying, I'm sorry, mom, dad, parent, what emotions is this bringing up for you when you see the kid rebelling against your values, your culture, your way of doing things? And maybe there are real risk concerns, and there usually will be, but the resistance itself, sometimes we pathologize it, right? Clinicians can play into this, right? Oppositional defiance disorder. Right? Sometimes there are real cases that are like, okay, this is some serious clinical stuff, but sometimes it's due to the relationship between the parent and the young person that's producing this pattern of resistance and defiance. Sometimes there are boundary issues there, right? But I think it's important to look at the whole family system. And it's interesting, like tapping into some social working perspectives, right? Like not just for individuals, but also for couples and families and communities and nations and for the whole species. Struggle has been a necessary part of progress at every stage of growth and development, right? Struggle and resistance and conflict is necessary for progress and growth and for positive things to happen, right? I think it's good for people to like get out of the good bad duality of seeing, well, if something feels bad, if there's conflict, then something is wrong, right? Conflict is good sometimes. Conflict can be very productive, right? And avoiding that allows issues to stay entrenched and then persist across generations or within a couple relationship or what have you, right? So I just like to try to reframe that for people. Right? Struggle is actually good. Like let's struggle for the right things,
Exactly. conviction. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you convicted about, and like what could you fight for that would actually bring positive change? You know, which is necessary in order for you to fight for what whatever it is you believe. Is like you have to have that conviction. Like, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I believe. And I'm sure there's other people who believe that same thing and will be willing to fight and create that level of positive social change, which is, I think in this world right now, it's like there's so much conformity and there's so much, and there's so just overwhelming, like, push for you to just, this is what it is, and you're gonna have to fall in line.
Fitting in,
especially fitting in. It's just like, because everyone wants to feel like they belong, and so there's this risk of like, what if I get rejected? Like, if I have this conviction and I fight for it, and what if everyone thinks you're crazy and like rejects me from them? From this standpoint. So, but like, it's necessary. I mean, in order for you to truly live out your own identity in your own life, like beyond just what your parents say, what I'm saying, beyond just what, some of those things you're always going to keep with you, but that's good and it's positive. And then who you are is different. You're not your mom, you're not your dad. You got to figure out who that is, and it's going to lead to some level of rejection. But the people who are supposed to be there, they're going to accept you because that's who connects with that spirit, that you.
Yeah. So I think then that really separates like that whole idea of like being alone versus lonely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes as you're reframing your sense of self or your identification, it feels like there are a lot of people that maybe just are not aligned with that path, right? So they may fall off, and that can feel like you're alone in that, right? But that's where where our true self activates. Right? But then also, not being able to draw in too much of what other people are saying or their expectations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Loneliness is a very interesting concept. So when you put in identity and all those things, like, because we hate being lonely, what I'm saying, and really hate being like alone, and so, but there's a difference between alone and lonely, and so, although we may be, alone, but we may not feel lonely, like we can feel perfectly fine, and happy and content. But feeling lonely, I think, that can sometimes, the fear of feeling lonely, it just can sometimes keep us from doing
being
those
in
things.
Those conforming places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep us conforming to those things that really don't align with who we are.
Yeah. That keep us stuck from those stages of change, right?
Yeah.
Full circle.
Yep.